Chapter 21, Part 2. This is the liberal phase of the French Revolution, picking up with the section called The Revolt of the Poor and the Oppressed. Basically, what we mean by liberal is this is the phase where all the good reforms were made. Liberalism, meaning classical liberalism, where people were given liberty and limits were put onto the government. It's by most people's account, it's the best part of the French Revolution, the part that sticks, the part that is still most relevant today, where a lot of progressive and modern legal reforms were done, and the most famous events of the revolution that actually accomplished things all happened at this point. After 1791, these first 2 years, it's going to become known as the radical phase, where things get really violent, and there's just a lot of chaos and mayhem. But these first 2 years are where most people were pretty happy with the results. So let's get right into it. Last time we were in the notes here, we were learning about the calling of the Estates General, the meeting of the three estates, and how the third estate walked out and broke away, became what was known as the National Assembly, and they passed the famous Oath of the Tennis Court, saying that they will not go away until they've written a new constitution and a new government for the nation of France. And so far there's been no violence, but there's some indecision on the part of the king. How does he handle this? This is an illegal move. What is he going to do about it? So meanwhile, we're going to keep flashing back between the meeting of the Estates General at Versailles and what's happening in the city of Paris, where all the people live, hundreds of thousands of people, urban dwellers. They call them sans-culottes. These are the working poor of Paris. So there's this back and forth between the events of the Estates General, where all the intellectual members of the Third Estate were, and in the cities of Paris, and then in the rural areas of France, where all the farmers are. So we got three different theaters of action here. Let's just keep those straight. So what's going on in the cities and in the farms is that there are problems with bread. The price of bread has doubled in the years leading up to the French Revolution. It's gone from 2 sous, S-O-U-S is the unit of currency, to 4 sous, and that's doubled. And most poor people couldn't even barely afford when it was 2 sous per pound. This is the main staple of the Frenchman's diet, okay? It's come to the point that bread costs a man nearly half of his wages to purchase the family bread. Again, this is what people eat several pounds of this per day. People in France still love their French baguette, so it's a big deal. It's their main food. There was a series. Why is the price so high? There's a series of harvest failures in 1787 and 88 that has just led to a shortage of bread, and so the prices have gone up. All right, you combine hunger with extreme poverty and unemployment in the cities, and you're going to have an angry crowd. In Paris, 150,000 people were unemployed out of a population of 600,000. So we're talking 25% of the city is without work. They're starving, and now they don't have any work. So it's a recipe for disaster. And the rumors start to spread as they heard about what happened at the Assembly, breaking away, and the king not sure, knowing he's sending troops. The 18,000 troops are on their way to Versailles. Rumors started spreading in the city of Paris that the troops were going to stop by Paris first and sack the city and as a move on the king's part to stop the deliberations and accomplishments of the new National Assembly. So one last thing before we move on to the other issue. We've got the bread. Here's a famous cartoon of the French wife and the French husband, and he's basically she's saying, oh, it's 3 sous per pound. He goes, wait till it gets to 8. And he sort of has this look on his eyes like he's about to rebel. He's got the red hat of the revolution on. You're going to see that hat a lot. If anyone supports the revolution, they wear a hat like that. So he's like, wait for 8. And then who knows what kind of crazy will happen then. So we go. Rumors of troops of coming to the city are on the way, and the people of Paris freak out. And they're starving and unemployed, and they go to one of the biggest buildings in the city, the Bastille. This is now July 1789. The Bastille is a medieval prison that was not only a real prison that mainly held political prisoners, so like someone like Voltaire had actually spent a good deal of his youth in the Bastille, and that's basically all that was there at this point, was people that had been jailed by the king for speaking out. But more than that, it was this symbol of oppression. It had walls that were 10 feet thick. It had 8 huge towers. Each of them was 100 feet high. It was this ancient, strong, it looked dark and ominous. And this is like where the people's anger gets turned on this building. It becomes a symbol of the absolute oppression of the king. And what the people were looking for was weapons. They thought there was a storehouse of weapons in here that they thought they might be able to get to defend themselves against these troops. Okay? By the time these people turned onto the prison and started to attack it, there actually weren't that many people in there. I think they killed something like 100 people. You know, when the crowd tries to break into the jail here, the guard of the prison kills several of the crowd, maybe up to 100 of them. And the people keep fighting. They try to break into this place to get the weapons. And they thought they were going to get in there and release all these prisoners, political prisoners that would join them. It was guarded by 80 soldiers and 30 Swiss mercenaries. But turns out there were only about a dozen or so, maybe a dozen or fewer people actually in the prison. So it was kind of a big disappointment. But they did have some good revolutionary actions here as they broke in. They hacked the main guard of the prison. They took him out in the streets and they hacked him to death. And they put his head on a pike and started parading it around. This becomes kind of a tradition of the French Revolution, the separating of people's heads from their bodies. So they broke in, they freed a few prisoners, but they mainly got their hands on some weapons. And this was a big deal. This was a symbolic victory for the people of Paris. They broke into this ancient building, overpowered the guards. It shows that the king has lost all control of the city, and the people are now, and they start to demolish it. The first thing they do after they took all the weapons, and you can see some of the people out here in the crowd, they started tearing it down brick by brick with their bare hands. It's sort of like when the Berlin Wall fell in 1989. People just came up to it with hammers and started pounding on it with all their decades of frustration. So it was a great symbolic and real victory for the people. It's also the first blood shed of the revolution. Write that down. So this is sort of setting a precedent that the French Revolution continues the whole way through, which is it's extremely violent. And there's a lot of beheadings, okay? So this is the first act of the people. This is not the rich guys. This is not the intellectuals. This is the hungry, poor workers of the city. And they had their victory over the Bastille. And here they go, starting to tear it down. So this is an important date in French history, July 14th, 1789. This is like their national independence day today. They celebrate this like it's July 4th for us. And there's here we go, big parades every July 4th. There's fireworks, the Eiffel Tower's lit up. It's a big party in the middle of the summer. The weather's nice, it's warm, people are out late at night. And they have this magnificent parade down the main street of Paris, the Champs-Élysées. And it's a military parade, of course. You see the French flags everywhere. And they've got the big Arc de Triomphe in the background, the symbol of their greatness, which will come under Napoleon. We're not there yet. So Bastille Day is a big deal for the French people today, okay? Let's go on. After the Bastille is stormed, now we move to the countryside, the third theater of action. And this is where farmers, poor peasant farmers, hear about what's happened in all of the months leading up to this, and they start to act themselves. And they basically go on this rampage called the Great Fear, in which they tear up and their landlords' houses. They burn the lords and the manor house to the ground. They break in. They tear up all the debts that they owe, any records that are kept in the manor house of any money they owe to their lord, or all the list of like duties that they have to perform for the lord every year, like working on his roads or paying him to use his mill, that kind of stuff. They rip it up. They burn it down. They kill. They commit murder in some cases. And it's this period of just plunder and pillaging and plundering in the countryside as the worst of the third estate, the poorest farmer peasants, start to enter the revolution. So again, three groups. The bourgeoisie are meeting at the assembly. The sans-culotte workers are in the city, and now the peasants are involved out in the rural areas. So now everyone's involved so far, and we've only been revolting for about 2 months. So what does this lead to? The National Assembly heard about these behaviors of the peasants in the countryside, and they immediately set to work passing what's called the August Decrees. And this was laws passed by the bourgeoisie in the National Assembly, and they officially put an end to serfdom and manorial rights. So anything like having to pay the lord certain fees every year, not being able to hunt on the land, all those kind of things, the feudal dues, all of those are now legally ended. forever. And this is a great victory for the people. The peasants are happy with this. This is all they want. They're good. And from this point forward, they don't really want to be a part of the revolution anymore. They got what they want, and they're going to be kind of a stable force moving forward, at least in the rural areas. The people in the city are not. People in the assembly are not. But now one group of the three is relatively happy. All right. The assembly continued to do its work. This was now by just in the same month, by the time we get to August 27th of 1789, they pass a Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. We call it abbreviated the DOROMAC, D-O-R-O-M-A-C. DOROMAC, kind of funny. And we're going to read a bit of this in class, of course, but the basics of it are that it says people are born free and remain free and are equal in their rights, that we have liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression, our natural rights. A little bit different from John Locke, who said life, liberty, and property. There's a different take on that. Everybody's presumed innocent until proven guilty. Law is an expression of the general will. Free expression of thought and opinion is one of the most precious rights of mankind. Every citizen may speak, write, and publish freely. So this is a liberal document. It's just like what happened in England with the Bill of Rights. It's a Declaration of Rights. It's a lot like the American Bill of Rights. Okay, very similar stuff. It's only 2 pages long. It's really short, it's to the point, and it's really the first one of these on the continent of Europe. So England's already done something similar, but now on the continent of Europe, this is the first nation to ever do this. So this is a big deal. This is still in effect today. The people of France still have their Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. Citoyen, they would say. All right, and so this event after event, here we go. 2 months later, there really hasn't been any change in the bread situation in Paris. So now people have rights. So the middle class is now relatively happy because they're on their way to getting political rights. The peasants are happy, but the people in the cities are still in misery. So the women of the city particularly start to play a major role in the events. This is called the Women's March to Versailles, also known as the October Days, because it happened in October of 1789. And the women are the main, taking care of the kids at this point, so they're very sensitive to the price of food. They can't feed their kids, and they start rioting, bread riots in the city. Of course, women's role, again, the children, they're managers of the household. They're the ones that are out getting the daily bread. 7,000 women start to gather in central Paris. These women are the fish market women. They worked part-time, some of them, as fish mongers, which means they, literally worked up to their arms in fish guts. These were burly, beefy, angry, aggressive women. And they took matters into their own hands and decided, well, there's no bread here, we're going to go to the king. And they had this incredibly famous march. 7,000 of them marched from Paris to Versailles. Took several hours, and they demanded bread, and they wanted to see the king personally. They had these 2 demands, and they brought with them weapons that had been taken from the Bastille, pikes, scythes, cannon, and they were a fearsome revolutionary force, and a testament to the participation of women in this whole story. So once they get to Versailles, they demanded to see the king, who they were nicknaming the baker. Give us the baker. We want bread. He's the man. Let's have the baker. Let's see the baker's wife. That's the queen. And let's have the baker's son. That's the future king. That's their little boy. And so this is this famous moment where there's 7,000 women at the gates of Versailles, and this is the point at which, in sort of historical lore, people came to tell the queen, there's all these people out there, and they want bread. And she says, well, is there any bread? And they say, no, there's no bread. And she goes, well, if there's no bread, let them eat cake. Now, this is a quote that is misattributed to her. Most people don't think she actually said this, but it really doesn't matter. It conveys an attitude that she had toward the common people of the nation, which is she really didn't care about them. Let them eat cake. Right, as if they have cake to eat. So she didn't really say that, but the spirit was there anyway. So historically, again, inaccurate, but most people wouldn't have known the difference anyway. So the people broke into the palace, they overpowered the guards, they cut some more heads off at the gates, and they trying to get the queen. They actually got into her bedroom, up through this magnificent palace, which you've already studied, and they literally wanted to gut her like a fish, and they were going to impale her, and they were going to slice her head off, and they wanted to, I'll just read you, we want to cut off her head, tear out her heart, fry her liver, and that won't be the end of it. The queen escaped out the back door very quickly, only literally by seconds, some people say. She was protected. The king came out, said he would give them bread from the royal granary, and they basically said, and we want you to come to Paris forever. You need to be closer to the city, and you need to be closer to where the action is. The people are saying this to the king. So to show good faith, the king agreed to move his family to Paris, to be where the people could he would respond to the crises that they were undergoing. And now this was it. They were never going to return to Versailles again. They were going to die in Paris at the guillotine a few years down the road. And the royal family basically from this point forward becomes under house arrest at another palace in Paris called the Tuileries. This is a huge momentous event. The people have essentially captured the king. He's still the king. He's still relatively free, but they've gotten him to make this huge concession by moving where he lives and abandoning this entire capital city of Versailles. So now back to the assembly again. They are really, this goes now 2 years kind of past, from 1789, October, all the way to 1791, and the National Assembly passes a constitution of 1791. So they fulfilled the tennis court oath. This is another major victory. It's liberal. It creates a constitutional monarchy. It's the end of absolutism. It abolishes the nobility as a social class altogether. So it's pretty important stuff. All lawmaking power is given to the National Assembly as part of this constitution. And there are several gains for women in here, which is divorce. Women are able to get a divorce, and they're able to own property. Okay, divorce and inherit and own property. And obtain financial support from their divorced husbands for any children that they might have. So basically, child support becomes law now in France, very modern. What are the limits for women? Well, they're not allowed to vote, and they're not allowed to participate in politics in any official capacity. But this is a big deal, okay? Most French men are going to have the right to vote from here on out. This is big, universal suffrage, okay? Really big stuff. Other things that the Assembly did as part of their reforms of 1791, they're going to create 83 states within France. So there's hundreds of little provinces. They're going to centralize those into 83. They call them administrative districts. And so this is how they're reorganizing society, making it more efficient and effective. In terms of weights and measures, they made into law the metric system so that everyone keeps weights and measures the same way. Here's a little image of how it shows people measuring things, and the pint, the gram, the meter, and then I don't know what 4, 5, and 6 are. I can't really tell. But we know the metric system is all based on 10, and it shows people measuring various things, counting various things, so that the society has some common ground for doing business. This is about business, okay, and finances and fairness. It's all about fairness as well. 1 gram of this over here means 1 gram of this over there. So it's standardization and equality. This is big stuff. They also got rid of monopolies and guilds. Okay, we want to start bringing in capitalism. This is liberal. Remember, it's Adam Smith style, English style stuff. So we want to bring in basically a free market. No more one company doing everything. No more guilds. Anyone that wants to make a product is free to do so. These are all inspired by the Enlightenment, of course, particularly, again, the work of John Locke, of Montesquieu, and of Adam Smith. Those are the three that we really need to be aware of. What about the church? They start to go to work on fixing and really reorganizing the entire Catholic Church. This is where they kind of go off the track a little bit. So this was common now. Remember what Henry VIII did in England during the Reformation? He took over all the church's property. He confiscated the monasteries. So the French Assembly, the National Assembly, does the same thing here. They took over. They nationalized the church. They said the church is not connected to Rome anymore. The Pope is not the leader of the French church. This was going on, this had been leading this way for a while. But now the nation controls the church. The government controls the church. They took all the property, sold it, and it started to pay for the revolution. okay? So that's, that had happened other places. They ended monastic life in monasteries, just like in England, and they created a national church where priests were going to be like public officials. They were going to be elected by voters, not picked by any government officials, but we're going to have elections. So it's standardizing, it's equality, fairness, and they also in this period of time they passed freedom, religious freedom, both to Jews and Protestants. So they were going to have some form of religious tolerance in France. So we're basically bringing back the Edict of Nantes, except even better at this point. Here's where they went a little bit too far. They passed what's called the Civil Constitution of the Clergy, which said that the priests had to take an oath of loyalty to the government, and to the revolution itself. Every priest that was going to be a priest now in the new church had to promise that they were supporters of the revolution. Not many priests wanted to sign this oath. Okay, priests have their oath to God, and they swear to the Bible. And this is their, as a clergyman, you don't want to, they don't want to swear anything loyalty except to the Bible and to their faith and to religion, not the nation. So this is a huge conflict, and it would have essentially made the priests employees of the state, of the government, which it was already starting to go that way. So there was massive resistance to this one particular thing, okay? The Pope, first of all, absolutely said this is ungodly, this is blasphemy. Half of the priests in France refused to sign this oath, one half. The common people hated this, and they thought this was an attack on their religion, and most people are deeply religious still. Incredibly. So the common people didn't really understand the Enlightenment approach here on religion, and they thought this was just an attack on their faith. So deep divisions started to grow between the rich and the poor. The bourgeoisie, who was making these decisions in the assembly, the middle class that has money, versus everybody else. The rural peasants, the sans-culottes in the city, they're all pretty religious still. They're very, somewhat ignorant, but also very religious. And now we start to split the revolutionary parts. Remember, the three were all united briefly, and now it starts to split. And this is the first major mistake by the National Assembly. And from this point on, it's going to get more and more radical, more and more divided, more and more violent, and eventually the whole thing is going to start to unravel. So this is the first part. It's the liberal part, it's the good part, where some really good things were accomplished. And at this point, they declare the slogan of the revolution, which is Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité, liberty, equality, and brotherhood. So you want to stop here and think what that we have looked at so far has promoted liberty and equality and a sense of brotherhood in the French Revolution. And at this point also you want to ask yourself, what if the revolution just had stopped right here and we had continued along with Louis XVI as a constitutional monarch with the August decrees in place, the end of serfdom, with the Constitutional 1791 in place, with the Declaration of the Rights of Man? What type of a society would that have been for the future? But it didn't. It didn't stop there. It rolls on. And we'll finish part 3 next time.